a global audience, explain Japan's politics today.
Well, I think it's fair to say that since Abe Shinzo came back to power in December 2012, there has been a rightward shift that resumed in politics, both in terms of economic reforms, but also in terms of increased attention to foreign and security policy, including the possible revision of the Constitution.
Explain this revision of the Constitution.
Well, the Japanese post-war Constitution was instituted during the occupation period by the United States, and it's particularly...
This is after World War II.
That's right. And
after the U.S. dropped the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
And because of the militarist past that caused a great deal of damage to the region and beyond, there was a great deal of efforts to democratize and demilitarize Japan with the new constitution after the Second World War. And it's particularly famous for the Article 9 that renounces war and war potential as a country.
The U.S. said they couldn't have a military.
That's right.
But they, in fact, have developed one under a different name.
Right. It's called a self-defense force, and it has big capacity to defend it, to defend the country. But there are still constitutional bans on Japan dispatching troops abroad, for example.
I wanted to go to the Japanese Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe, or Abe Shinzo. Abe is the last name,
That's
Shinzo
right.
is first, but in Japanese you say the first name last and last name first. So let's go to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe after he visited the Yasukuni War Shrine.
I showed my respects to the war dead who sacrificed their precious lives for Japan and also prayed for their souls to rest in peace. I also prayed for the resting of the souls of all the people whose lives were taken by war. Additionally, I vowed for a renunciation of war, and I was emboldened to create an era where people's lives would not be engulfed and pained by the misery of war.
And now let's go to the response of China and South Korea. Both condemn Prime Minister Abe's visit to this shrine. This is spokesperson from the Chinese Foreign Ministry.
It is a double-faced act that the Japanese leader made such remarks. He called black white and confused the public opinion. Some Japanese politicians, on one hand, keep talking about democracy, freedom, and peace. On the other hand, promote militarism, beautify Japan's foreign aggression, and history of colonization. This is actually a blasphemy against democracy, freedom, and peace. Abe's visit to the Yasukuni Shrine jeopardized the political foundation of the China-Japan relationship and created new obstacles for improvement and development of bilateral ties. Japan will face all the consequences.
Professor Koichi Nakano, can you explain the significance? Some have compared it to when President Reagan visited the Bitburg Cemetery with the German SS officers buried there.
Right. Well, the Yasukuni War Shrine is particularly notorious for enshrining 14 Class A war criminals who are...
Class A war criminals?
Right. Class A war criminals are basically wartime leaders of Japan, including Prime Minister Tojo, who attacked Pearl Harbor when he was Prime Minister. And the Chinese government, after, in the post-war period, made peace with Japan with the understanding that the Japanese people were also victims of wartime leaders who misled the country. And so for the Chinese, the idea that the current Prime Minister visits the Yasukuni Shrine where those war criminals are enshrined is basically to say that Japan bears no responsibility for the wartime atrocities.
So why did he do it? Other prime ministers have not.
Well, actually, there have been other prime ministers who've done that in the past, and but it has become a taboo issue from 1985 in particular, when the Chinese government started to criticize very openly the visits by the prime minister. But before Abe, in last December, Koizumi too, while he was prime minister between 2001 and 2006, repeatedly visited the Yasukuni Shrine, and during that time period, the bilateral relationship between Japan and China were completely frozen.
I also want to ask about Japan's the issue of Japan's state secrets, recently enacted state secrets law. In November, the U.S. ambassador to Japan, now Caroline Kennedy, endorsed the law, saying, quote, "We support the evolution of Japan's security policies as they create a new national security strategy, establish a national security council, and take steps to protect national security secrets."
Right. The pressure coming from the U.S. has been going on for some time, and at the very latest, I think, already from 2009. And so the bill of state secrecy has been in the pipeline for some time, and Abe this time seizing the opportunity by securing the majority in both houses of the parliament, went ahead in combination with another bill, as you just mentioned, that set up the Japanese version of the National Security Council.
And talk about state secrets. What are these state secrets?
Well, it's very poorly defined. It of course, concerns primarily security issues and anti-terrorist measures. But in the parliamentary exchange, it became increasingly clear that the interpretation of what actually constitutes state secret could be very arbitrary and rather freely defined by government leaders. And for example, anti-nuclear citizen movements can come under surveillance without their knowledge, and arrests can be made if it turns out that they obtain some information that they didn't even know constituted state secrets.
You talk about Japanese shock doctrine.
Right. The state secrecy law that was passed in December last year, just a month ago, basically 2 years after the big earthquake and tsunami and the nuclear power accident that still continues to literally kind of shake Japan. And in the climate of anxiety and insecurity, the government basically is pushing in the classic sort of Naomi Klein kind of way of shock doctrine. And for the Japanese, it is particularly worrisome because it reminds us of what happened before the Second World War, actually, when Tokyo was destroyed by a huge earthquake in 1923, and the peace preservation law that eventually led to the birth of state secret police and the brutality of the military regime was also enacted 2 years right after the big earthquake that destroyed Tokyo back in the 1920s. So the parallel is quite spooky.
And the parallel now with Fukushima, what it would mean in a cover-up of what's been happening. And we're not talking about the past now, though it's almost 3 years ago, because this is continuing to unfold.
Exactly. The continuous contamination of water, of ocean, of the soil, and the continuous danger with the spent fuels in the nuclear reactors in Fukushima. I think there are lots of concerns, and citizens are trying to know the truth. But I think the state secrecy law is potentially going to make it easier for the government to cover up information.